I met Emily 2 years ago, and from the very first moment, she made me feel like I was the only safe place she had left in this world. She told me heartbreaking stories about her ex, Kyle, describing him as a violent stalker who never stopped haunting her life. Every time she trembled in my arms, I believed her more, convinced that she needed me to protect her from a nightmare that refused to end. As our wedding day approached, I thought I was stepping into a future built on trust, love, and sacrifice. But beneath the surface of those tender moments and whispered fears, something darker was hiding, something she never expected me to uncover. And the first crack in her perfect story appeared the day I decided to verify one small detail about Kyle, a detail that would destroy everything I thought I knew. I asked my cousin Logan, a private investigator, to help me because something about Emily's fear didn't sit right with me. She described Kyle as a relentless stalker, someone who appeared outside her workplace, sent threatening messages, and followed her car at night. But whenever I offered to report him to the police, she panicked and begged me not to. She always had an excuse. They won't believe me. He'll get worse. Please don't make him angry. Her reactions felt real, but the details never added up, so I finally told Logan everything. He agreed to tail Kyle for a few days, just to confirm whether the man was actually around Emily's neighborhood. I didn't expect much from it. I honestly thought Logan would tell me that Kyle had been spotted lurking nearby, and that Emily had been telling the truth all along. But only 24 hours after he started, Logan called me with a tone I had never heard from him before. He told me to sit down. He said Kyle wasn't stalking Emily at all. In fact, Kyle was barely thinking about her, because he was too busy cheating on his wife, Melissa. And the woman he was cheating with was Emily. Logan followed them from Kyle's office to a quiet diner on the edge of town, where they sat together like a couple who'd been doing this for years. Emily looked nothing like the terrified victim she pretended to be with me. She was smiling, touching his arm, laughing at something he said, completely relaxed. From there, they drove straight to a hotel they clearly knew well. They checked in without hesitation, and Logan waited in the parking lot for hours, documenting every detail. When he sent me the first photo of them walking in together, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might faint. There she was, my fiancée, wearing the necklace I bought her, holding the hand of the man she claimed had ruined her life. Logan said Kyle had a wife and 2 kids at home, and that this affair had probably been going on far longer than I imagined. He had already confirmed the hotel visits happened at least twice a week. I didn't want to believe it, so I asked Logan to keep watching for another week. Part of me prayed it was all a misunderstanding, some impossible coincidence, anything but what the photos showed. But every single day, Emily and Kyle met like clockwork. Lunches, drives, hotels. Everything she told me, every tear, every moment she pretended to be afraid, had been a calculated lie to cover up the truth. She wasn't being stalked. She wasn't being threatened. She wasn't running from her past. She was running straight into Kyle's arms the second I wasn't looking. And with each new piece of evidence Logan gathered, I felt something inside me start to crack, not just my trust, but the entire foundation of the life I thought I was building. Logan didn't stop at photos, because he knew I needed more than images to understand just how deep this betrayal went. He dug into Emily's messages, phone records, and private accounts, and what he uncovered made my chest feel like it was caving in. The fear she had shown me, the panic in her voice whenever Kyle's name came up, the trembling hands she pressed against mine, all of it was rehearsed. Behind my back, she and Kyle exchanged messages filled with inside jokes, plans, and fantasies about a life they would build together once everything was taken care of. And I soon realized taken care of meant me. In one message, Emily complained that I was too loyal and too patient, calling me a perfect temporary distraction until Kyle was ready to leave his wife. In another, Kyle told her to keep him close, because the money I was putting into the wedding could help them start over somewhere else. They spoke openly about running away after the wedding, moving to a different state, and buying a small house Kyle had found online. Emily said she would act devastated about the divorce and use it to get sympathy from her friends and family. They even joked about me paying for a honeymoon they planned to skip so they could spend the money on themselves instead. I stared at those messages for hours, unable to comprehend that the woman sleeping next to me every night was writing things like that. The same woman who pressed her forehead to mine and whispered that she loved me. The same woman who cried about wanting a future with me. Logan found emails between them discussing legal details about Kyle leaving Melissa, strategizing the best time for him to file papers, and speculating how much he might lose in the divorce. Emily reassured him she didn't care if he came out of it broke, because I could help them stay afloat for a while. She talked about the gifts I bought her, as if they were investments she deserved to cash in. She even mentioned selling the engagement ring I gave her, saying it would be a nice boost for their starting budget. Every line I read made me feel like I was dissolving from the inside out. There were no signs of hesitation in her words, no guilt, no conflict, just calculation. They planned holidays, birthdays, vacations, all without me, all in a future where I was nothing but a stepping stone they had already walked over. The final blow came when Logan played an audio recording he captured outside the hotel. Emily laughed and said she couldn't believe I still thought Kyle was stalking her. Kyle responded that I was useful and easy to manipulate. Hearing their voices say it out loud made everything real in a way no photo ever could. Their future together was mapped out in astonishing detail, while mine was nothing but a placeholder in their timeline. And with every new message, every plan they crafted, something colder and sharper began forming inside me, a clarity I didn't ask for, but one I could no longer ignore. The wedding day arrived, and I put on the mask of a happy groom as if nothing had changed. Emily smiled at me, and I returned it with the same warmth I always had, hiding the storm raging beneath my skin. Guests arrived, dressed in their finest, chatting excitedly about the ceremony and the celebration to come. I walked down the aisle, said my vows with a calm tone, and let everyone believe I was the man in love, unaware of the truth. Inside, my mind was replaying every message, every hotel visit, every lie Emily had told me. I waited for the perfect moment, knowing that once it came, there would be no turning back. When the reception began, I raised my glass and made a brief speech thanking everyone for attending. Then I excused myself and gave a subtle signal to the DJ to start the slideshow. Instead of the usual romantic photos, the screen filled with images from Logan's investigation. There was Emily and Kyle walking into the hotel together, laughing, holding hands, completely unaware anyone was watching. Then came the screenshots of their messages, the emails planning their escape, the audio clips of their plotting, every detail laid bare. A hush fell over the room. Guests froze, staring at the screen, their conversations dying in midair. Emily's face went from confident to pale as the truth hit her like a physical blow. Her hands trembled, her lips parted, and she tried to speak, but no sound came out. Kyle, who had been pretending to be a friend of the family, turned toward his wife, Melissa, only to see her standing there, stunned and angry, holding their children close. Melissa's face was a mix of shock and fury, and she didn't hesitate. She announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear, that she was filing for divorce immediately, citing evidence of the affair. Emily's panic escalated. She screamed, cried, and clawed at the air, trying to explain herself, but every lie she had told me now looked absurd in front of 200 witnesses. The guests whispered among themselves, many shaking their heads in disbelief. Some friends who had sided with Emily stared at her in horror, realizing they had been deceived too. Kyle tried to defend himself, but his words fell flat against the undeniable proof on the screen and the presence of his betrayed wife. I stood there, feeling a mix of relief and anger, letting the room absorb the truth. It was a moment of absolute exposure, where every secret, every deception, every plan to betray me unraveled at once. Emily's makeup ran down her face as she wept uncontrollably, the bravado she had carried for so long completely gone. Kyle's attempts to justify himself were drowned out by Melissa's calm, cutting words, and the room's collective judgment. For the first time, the reality of their betrayal could no longer hide behind lies, excuses, or manipulations. And in that moment, I realized that the power of truth, when finally revealed, could be far more devastating than any revenge I might have imagined. After the wedding, the fallout was immediate and brutal. Emily turned to me with tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were filled with rage rather than sorrow. She shouted accusations, claiming I had orchestrated the entire reveal to humiliate her, painting herself as the victim. Her family quickly joined in, surrounding me with words that cut like knives, blaming me for destroying their daughter's happiness. They called me cruel, obsessive, and heartless, insisting that Emily had been manipulated and that I had exploited her vulnerability. Even some of our mutual friends, unsure of what to believe, hesitated, glancing between the screens still playing evidence and Emily's frantic explanations. Emily reached out to anyone who would listen, twisting the story to make it appear that I was the abuser, that my jealousy and distrust had led to this public disaster. She claimed I had pressured her, coerced her into telling lies, and had forced her into emotional corners where she had no choice but to betray me. Her sobs were loud, calculated, and desperate, designed to evoke sympathy from anyone willing to give it. I could see some of our guests start to doubt what they had witnessed moments earlier, as Emily painted herself as a fragile, tormented woman caught in a man's cruel game. Her parents and siblings spoke in concert, amplifying the narrative she crafted, pressing me with questions and insinuations meant to make me appear unhinged. They demanded apologies, explanations, and even restitution, framing me as the antagonist of a story I had not authored. Emily's manipulation extended to private messages she sent to friends who hadn't attended, preemptively shaping their opinions against me. She claimed emotional abuse, psychological pressure, and a history of controlling behavior, all of which were fabrications. Everywhere I turned, I felt the weight of the narrative she was spinning, as if my own truth was being swallowed by her deception. Some of her friends, loyal to her for years, began to echo her words online and in private conversations, questioning my character and intentions. Even my attempts to explain myself were met with skepticism, as Emily's tears and frantic demeanor painted her as the injured party. I realized that exposing the truth in front of 200 people was only the beginning. The real battle was against the ripple effect of her lies. The humiliation of the day did not end when the guests left. It continued as calls, texts, and messages filled my phone, each one carrying questions, doubts, or judgment inspired by Emily's manipulation. I felt isolated, as if the world had turned against me, but I also knew that retreating or apologizing would only validate her lies further. Her strategy was clear: shift all responsibility onto me, make me the villain, and attempt to recover the narrative she had lost in front of the wedding guests. She leveraged everyone around her, family, friends, and acquaintances, to reinforce her version of events, making it difficult for anyone to see the truth. Despite the overwhelming pressure and the emotional onslaught, I refused to engage in reactive arguments with her or her supporters. I remained silent in public, letting her words circulate while internally preparing for a methodical response that could not be ignored. Emily's cruelty extended beyond betrayal. It was now an active campaign to destroy my reputation, turn allies into skeptics, and make me question my own perception of reality. And yet, beneath the chaos, I began to understand that her desperation was also proof of how exposed she truly was, and that the fight was far from over. After the immediate chaos of the wedding, I knew I couldn't leave things to chance. Emily and Kyle had shown the world their willingness to lie, manipulate, and betray, and I needed to make sure the consequences were unavoidable. I spent hours compiling every piece of evidence Logan had gathered: screenshots, photos, audio recordings, emails, and even travel records showing their meetings. Nothing was left out. I created a detailed report, documenting not just the affair, but their plans to exploit me financially and emotionally. Once I felt confident the report was comprehensive, I sent it directly to the organization where Emily and Kyle worked. It was a nonprofit focused on women's empowerment, and I knew that once they saw what had happened, they could not ignore the betrayal and the potential damage to their reputation. Almost immediately, HR confirmed receipt and assured me that a full investigation would begin. Within days, both Emily and Kyle were suspended pending review. Kyle's professional misconduct, combined with the proof of forgery and fraud he had committed in his personal dealings, triggered a deeper investigation. It turned out he had falsified documents at work and misappropriated funds, actions that were completely separate from the affair, but now undeniable because of the scrutiny brought by the report. Emily faced consequences too. Her lies and manipulation were revealed to colleagues, friends, and the community that had supported her. People who had believed her victim narrative were forced to confront evidence that exposed her deception and betrayal. Her credibility evaporated almost overnight. The nonprofit terminated both of them, citing violations of trust, ethical misconduct, and misrepresentation. Kyle's wife, Melissa, gained further leverage in the divorce proceedings, armed with the documented proof of his infidelity and unethical actions. He faced serious questions from legal authorities regarding financial misconduct and forgery, which would affect his personal and professional future. Emily, meanwhile, lost her income, professional standing, and social support network. Friends who had once stood by her distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone who had so blatantly deceived and manipulated those closest to her. Even people outside our immediate circle learned about the situation, and Emily's reputation in the community crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. For me, the process was not about revenge. It was about accountability. I wanted to ensure that the manipulation, lies, and betrayal could not continue unchecked. Every piece of evidence I submitted forced the people involved to face reality, and for the first time, the consequences of their actions became unavoidable. I watched as their carefully constructed world began to collapse, each decision they made unraveling further under the scrutiny of truth. The satisfaction was not in punishment, but in knowing that integrity and honesty could not be silenced. I remained focused, methodical, and patient, making sure that every step I took was measured and thorough. By the time the dust settled, both Emily and Kyle had lost their jobs, credibility, and support, facing legal and social consequences they could no longer evade. And through it all, I stayed grounded, knowing that exposing the truth was the only way to protect myself and ensure justice was done. The aftermath of the fallout extended far beyond the office doors and wedding hall. Kyle's life unraveled quickly once the investigations began. The federal inquiry into his financial misconduct and forgery forced him to resign immediately. With no job, no access to his previous income, and mounting legal fees, he was left with nothing. He had to live in his car for several weeks, moving from parking lot to parking lot, unable to maintain any semblance of stability for himself or his children. Melissa, empowered by the documented evidence of Kyle's betrayal and misconduct, won the divorce case decisively. She secured custody of their children and the majority of their assets, leaving Kyle with virtually nothing. Emily's situation was similarly catastrophic. Her lies and manipulation had alienated nearly everyone she knew. Friends who had once defended her distanced themselves after learning the full truth, unable to reconcile her actions with the image she had portrayed. Her professional life was destroyed. She had been fired from the nonprofit, and her reputation made it impossible to find similar work in her field. She moved back in with her parents, struggling to rebuild a life that had been carefully dismantled by her own choices. Her only source of income became a small kiosk selling phone accessories at a local mall, a stark contrast to the career she had once pursued with ambition. Emily's social circle shrank to nearly nothing, leaving her isolated and forced to confront the consequences of her deception alone. Those who had once stood by her, believing in her fabricated stories of abuse and fear, eventually realized the truth. Some reached out to apologize to me for doubting my account, acknowledging the role they had played in amplifying her lies. Kyle's legal troubles continued for months, as authorities pursued the forgery and financial fraud cases in parallel with his divorce proceedings. The strain on him was immense, both financially and emotionally, as every facet of his life collapsed under the weight of accountability. Emily, facing the harsh reality of social rejection and economic hardship, had to reckon with the choices she had made. She lost not only friends and career opportunities, but also credibility and the trust of anyone who had once cared about her. Despite the overwhelming challenges, these consequences served as a stark reminder of how carefully documented evidence and unwavering honesty can protect those who have been wronged. The ripple effects of their actions left a permanent mark on their lives, making it impossible for either to return to the life they had imagined. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance as the world corrected itself in a way that validated every precaution I had taken. The people who had initially doubted me came to understand that truth, once revealed, has a power that lies cannot match. The lessons of accountability, integrity, and meticulous evidence became clear, not just for Emily and Kyle, but for everyone who witnessed the aftermath. Ultimately, the situation underscored the importance of standing firm, documenting reality, and allowing justice to unfold naturally. In the end, the legal, social, and financial consequences ensured that deception could no longer thrive unchecked, and the truth restored balance to the chaos they had created. In the months following the collapse of Emily and Kyle's schemes, I began to rebuild my life with a sense of clarity I had never felt before. I started therapy, confronting the emotional wounds left by their betrayal and learning how to trust myself again. At work, I focused on my career and earned a promotion, a tangible reminder that diligence and integrity are rewarded. I bought a new car, not as a statement, but as a symbol of moving forward and reclaiming control over my life. Hobbies I had abandoned returned to me, running, painting, and photography, helping me reconnect with parts of myself I had neglected. Socially, I was more cautious, but also wiser, recognizing the importance of intuition and the value of paying attention to red flags. I never regretted exposing the truth in front of 200 people at the wedding. It had been painful, humiliating, and intense, but it was necessary. Emily had chosen manipulation and betrayal, and facing the consequences was the only way for me to protect myself and assert the truth. Now, I can look back without bitterness, knowing that I acted with honesty and courage. My message to anyone listening is simple. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never let deception control your future. The truth will always find a way to reveal itself, and when it does, it has the power to restore balance, justice, and peace.